The Biden administration, under the Department of Justice, have now filed a civil lawsuit against the state of Texas earlier this week over Governor Greg Abbott's decision to install a 1,000-foot floating border barrier in the Rio Grande River near the city of Eagle Pass. It has been criticized by, I'm gonna say, human rights activists as a murderous act, a willful attempt to kill people in the river that is already reaping benefits for the people who want to see more migrants die on their way into the United States. We're gonna talk a little bit about this lawsuit, the response from the Abbott administration, but I will let you know that based on the filing of the lawsuit, they say his floating barrier poses threats to navigation and public safety and presents humanitarian concerns. Additionally, the presence of the floating barrier has prompted diplomatic protests by Mexico and risks damaging US foreign policy. Now, they mention a few things there because they're going through multiple different areas of the law to attempt to get this taken down, and we'll break those down. But first, here is a shot of the barriers. You'll notice it's wrapped in barbed wire. That is certainly a choice that these Republican Christians have made. What they think is that people are swimming across the river without enough of their skin being torn off. And they've come up with this novel solution to that. They really think that they can do more in the area of skin ripping by installing this barbed wire. So very innovative on the part of Greg Abbott and his administration. We're gonna turn to some more of the legal arguments, but Adrienne, what do you make of this?
Just like you'd mentioned, that added level of just distasteful, absolutely inhumane. It's crazy what they're doing in Texas, that barbed wire, the thought that we not only want to discourage and hopefully prevent people from coming over, but we want them to physically suffer in the event that they come to our country seeking asylum. It's gross, and I'm glad that the Biden administration is stepping up to sue because it's violating several laws out there and possibly international treaties as well.
Yeah, I want to correct myself. I noticed a comment, apologies. When I get something wrong, I feel like I should fix that. It is not barbed wire, it's razor wire. It's more dangerous, more deadly. So I want to make sure that people understand what's actually going on there. And just, I know that I'm gonna be like focused on this for a bit or whatever, but like, can you imagine Jesus just looking at the floating barriers and thinking, you know what that needs? That needs razor wire. And then Jesus, who, he was a carpenter, so he's good with his hands, he's very handy, wrapping it in razor wire so that the people who are so desperate to get out of the situations they were in other countries are willing to swim across this river can be torn open and bleed out in the river. Can you imagine Jesus doing that? I don't have to, I'm an atheist. I'm just saying, if you're a conservative Christian or whatever, can you imagine Jesus? What would Jesus wrap with razor wire is the question that I would ask you. Anyway, one of the ways that the DOJ is suing Texas is by violating the Rivers and Harbors Act. It says that this section of the Rivers and Harbors Act prohibits the unauthorized obstruction or alteration of any navigable water of the US. Basically, you can't do this sort of construction unless it's recommended by the chief of engineers and authorized by the secretary of the army. I wish that you did not need to get into this sort of thing to try to reverse the building of these barriers. But I understand why legally they might feel like it is easier to win in this area than in the fact that this is obviously designed to kill people. So I guess that's what they're doing. Anyway, by having this lawsuit, I guess Greg Abbott is getting what he wanted. He had said earlier this week, Texas will see you in court, Mr. President. All of this is happening because you have violated your constitutional obligation to defend the states against invasion through faithful execution of federal laws. And by that he means that a bunch of people are crossing the southern border. In fact, at one point there were like record levels. And so obviously if people are crossing the border, then your administration is utterly illegitimate. Unless it was under Trump, where tons and tons of people crossed the border and it didn't bother them at all. Anyway, by the way, also migrant crossings are way down. They've absolutely plummeted, falling to far lower levels than before. Weird that that doesn't affect the right wingers. Like they say that lots of people crossing the border is reason to sue Biden, to impeach him. And yet when the numbers fall, getting to far less than half of what they were just a few months ago, they don't care about that. It's weird. It's almost like the absolute number of migrants crossing the border is not actually their concern, that this is a convenient ruse of some sort. I'm not saying that's what they're doing. I'm just saying that that's how they're acting. Anyway, we don't know exactly how this is going to proceed. We do have to bear in mind, as we will have to for a few years at least, The conservatives have a supermajority in the Supreme Court. They can effectively do whatever they want. They've shown a willingness to do whatever they want. So if this challenge gets all the way to them, I'm not saying they haven't done anything reasonable over the last couple of years, but it's rare. So I don't necessarily have a lot of hope. Adrienne, you obviously have a lot more expertise in this area. What do you think might happen?
I hope that they get the right judge, that's for sure, because we know how Trump had infiltrated all the courts with all these members of the judiciary who are unwilling to acknowledge and recognize the laws. But otherwise, this should be a pretty strong case moving forward for the federal government. DOJ pointing out, hey, there's a whole Rivers and Harbors Act. Your little Operation Lone Star is running afoul of the Constitution, and we're not just going to trim a little fat off of it. So it just really continues to show you that these right wingers out here, like Greg Abbott, that they do not care about the law. No, they are using circumstances that may not even be in existence right now, as a way to rile up their base, knowing that their base is ill-informed and uninformed.
Yeah, and hoping that they will remain so and possibly get worse in the future. Anyway, good to see the Biden administration doing this. We have, I think, rightly been very critical of a lot of what they've done on the border, which one of the most ironic things of the first few years of the Biden administration is they've been endlessly attacked from day one by the Republicans, when much of what they've done is, in some cases willingly, in some cases unwillingly, continuing the border policies of the Trump administration. There have been times when they're clearly doing it to score points with the right, as if that's a thing that can happen. I didn't understand it at the time. The fact that they're being attacked in this way is a demonstration of how ridiculous a strategy that was.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.